Hi again, it's Jason from Fraser Valley Rose Farm, and I admit I'm having a little fun with you. I don't actually believe there's any mainstream conspiracy of garden centers trying to keep these plants out of your hands, but I do have 10 plants to talk about here that for no fault of their own are not available in the mainstream trade, and I want to talk to you about why, and again, what they are. They are wonderful plants. I'm going to give you an example right off the top here, is to say something like Heliopsis bleeding hearts. It's a kind of a perennial sunflower, or Alciafolia Las Vegas, a colorful hollyhock variety that is powdery mildew resistant, or Lavendula Q Red. You don't see it in that shade, and the reasons why these don't get into the garden center really come down to just a couple. One is that either they are too hard to explain or have a life cycle that the garden center doesn't want to have to tell the customer about, or because they're not available locally so easily from cutting or from seed, or it just could be knowledge. I mean, the garden centers might just not know about these varieties. One way or another, they are immensely worth growing, and I'm going to go through 10 of them in a list here. I'm going to put that list up on the screen right now, just so you know where the timestamp comes in, and I promise that as I discuss these, I will put up pictures, I will talk about what zone they are hardy to, and I'm also going to give the sun exposure for these varieties at the same time. First up on my list is that Heliopsis bleeding hearts. It's actually a perennial sunflower, and therein may lie the issue with its marketability. People are accustomed to thinking of sunflowers as kind of an annual, and so when you're trying to sell them as a perennial, it takes a little extra explanation. Obviously, perennials usually command a higher price in the garden center, but this one is totally worth it. It has bright orange-red flowers, just extremely vibrant, and it's the only perennial sunflower I've seen so far, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that doesn't have yellow in the color of the flower. So it's gorgeous. It grows to 3 to 4 feet, so mid to back of border, depending on how you're constructing your border, and it has dark, bold foliage that makes it absolutely worth growing. Now, where do you get it from if you can't find it in your local garden center? In this case, I'm going to say buy it from seed. I got it from Gelito. That's one of my primary seed suppliers. You'll see their name come up a few times in this video because they have a good assortment of perennials from seed, but you can actually just use the cultivar name and search this, and you may find it available through other seed companies in America. It's just Gelito, what has been my go-to for a while. Next plant on the list is Centaurea, Amethyst, and Snow, and I think maybe I'll just put the picture up on the screen and then shut up, because it sells itself. Okay, maybe I can't shut up. But this is just an amazing looking plant. It has the white through light lilac outer petals and then a deeper violet inner petals that just makes it a showstopper in the garden. Now, those people who know about Centaurea montana, mountain bluet is its other name, know that it may be spreading by seed. And this may be one of the reasons why most garden centers might shy away from putting it into their assortment, just because it does have that spreading tendency. And so I just, instead of taking it out of gardens, I just warn people about it. I mean, I have Centaurea montana in my garden. It has not been spreading here owing to a fairly heavy soil. It's probably situational in the garden that you're at, but as long as you know about that going in, I have no hesitation putting a plant like this in the garden, especially when it's as beautiful as this one. I got mine from a local bare root distributor called Van Noort Bulbs. Next up is Lavendula Q Red. And the really point that people don't carry this for is because it's just not that available. I've been looking for it for years on the market and haven't been able to find it locally. I finally found it through a local garden center that does a great job of sourcing cuttings from all around the world. The garden center I got it from is called Devon Greenhouses, locally quite famous, and not maybe for this particularly, but it's something else that they do really, really well, is sourcing cuttings from around the world. Lavendula Q Red is in a color that pushes past, I mean, oftentimes in lavenders, you'll see them go from those shades of violet and into kind of a pink, but this one pushes past that into almost a dark red color, which makes it quite distinct in the garden, so worth seeking out. Here's something cool. Let's talk about Digitalis Monstrosa. It's a basic Digitalis purpurea variety, which has those long spikes of purple and white striped or speckled flowers. Spotted flowers is more proper to say. But this one has a distinctive terminal flower. The flower at the top of the stem turns out to be a cup shape, an open cup shape right at the top, and it's much larger than all of the other flowers or florets on the spike. It makes it a really interesting look. Now, this one here, probably, as far as its marketing ability, the garden centers stick away from it because, in general, they don't do a great job of doing second-year perennials. This one, you'd plant it 1 year, and it's more or less, I'm going to call it a biennial or perennial. It will bloom in the second year. So oftentimes that's a little bit harder to market. And then, of course, how do you tell people or convey to people the issue of just that one interesting terminal flower? So it remains a very cool plant, but not widely promoted. And I got mine from seed from Gelito. Let's talk next about Euonymus Fortunii Wolong Ghost. Now, this is just not widely available just because it's not widely available. It's one of those ones that whenever you see it show up on a gardening blog, people gush and glow about it, but you just never see it in the gardening centers. I think it's just a matter of the distribution of the cuttings, or it just hasn't reached a wide spread within the industry yet. But it's gorgeous. I got a pot of it here. And honestly, the story behind this is that I found it in somebody else's garden, a plant collector. I took a couple of cuttings or a couple of rooted tips that were in the ground and put it into this pot, and it's taken off. So I'm starting to propagate it now. It has interesting markings all over the leaves, and it has these slender leaves that just make it extremely ornamental. Every time I see pictures of it, it's great. It's also adaptable to sunny or shady locations and does a good job as a ground cover or as a small climber, so it's adaptable that way. Just really worth seeking out in your garden, but again, the garden centers wouldn't have it just because it's just not widely distributed at this point, although now that I do have a mother plant, I'll be taking lots of cuttings and trying to sell it here. Alciafolia Las Vegas is an interesting kind of hollyhock. It has leaves that don't look like the standard hollyhock. Hollyhock has generally a mallow-looking leaf, or kind of a roundish, crinkled leaf. This one has a leaf that looks like a fig leaf with all of the lobes on it. What it also is distinctive from the basic garden center varieties is that it's powdery mildew resistant, and so it's been very vigorous in my garden. Now, why don't garden centers grow this as an alternative to the standard hollyhocks? It's probably just a matter of having to explain it. It looks different, it acts different. People don't understand the advantage of having a powdery mildew resistant variety, but it does grow with beautiful spikes of very brightly colored flowers, so I would definitely recommend it. I got mine from seed, again from Gelito, but there are other seed companies that carry this one. Next on my list is Clematis integrifolia Mongolian bells. And what's interesting about this clematis, people are accustomed to thinking of clematis as kind of a scrambling climber going up high and covering things. This is a herbaceous clematis that stays quite small, even down as low as 12 or 18 inches from the ground, and just sort of spreading with hanging bell-shaped flowers. Now, as to why other garden centers don't grow it, I guess it probably does come down to the fact of it being a little bit unusual. It takes additional explanation. I think you can probably consider that a running theme now, is that if a plant would require you to tell the customer what it does as opposed to what they're expecting it to do, then it's going to be a little bit harder for garden centers to carry that and a little bit harder for them to sell it, so they just won't take it on. But this one is very hardy, very beautiful colors, coming in a range of colors from blue, violet, white, and pink. So it's a really interesting looking plant. And again, I got this from seed, so I bought it from Gelito. Next one on my list is Lysomachia atropurpurea Beaujolais. Now, it probably suffers a little bit from guilt by association. When people hear about Lysomachia, they tend to think of it as a very aggressive plant. And again, with the common name of gooseneck loosestrife or loosestrife, people really think that this is going to be a very, very invasive plant. But Beaujolais is not like that. It has silvery leaves, purple flowers in that gooseneck kind of shape, but it's rather tame in the garden. Tends to be, I'm going to call it a short-lived perennial because I've never had one last more than 3 or 4 years in the garden, but definitely worth having for the time. They're very ornamental, especially combined with other plants. And again, I started this one from seed. I have a batch in there, started from seed from Gelito. Anthirscus sylvestris Ravenswing is an interesting biennial or perennial. That's one strike against it, is that people don't like biennials. If you grow it 1 year and then it blooms the next, people don't understand that cycle. It can be a short-lived perennial in the garden, but don't let any of that dissuade you. This is a plant with bold leaves growing up to 4 or 5 feet tall, and the leaves are just almost dark black when it's grown in full sun, followed by white flowers. It can put on quite a display. Now, The other thing about this is it's a carrot relative, and with those small little flowers, it does a great job, those clusters of flowers, of bringing beneficial insects and wasps and supporting all of the diversity of wildlife in your garden that helps to bring pest populations under control. I suspect it would self-seed if you let it, so that's something to watch out for, but overall, just a wonderful plant that you're not going to find in too many places, and I've seen it promoted as a cut flower as well, so that's another use for this wonderful plant. Finally on my list is a perennial globe flower I've been growing for a number of years. This is Trollius ircuticus. It's an orange globe flower. Now, I think I initially did get the seeds from Gelito, but since then I've been collecting the seeds every year and just making my own. These are a wonderful globe flower. I'm not going to glow about them too much except to say that I'm so accustomed to seeing the globe flowers in those shades of yellow, and they look like a buttercup to me. But this one, in its bright shade of orange with the darker stamens, I just love the way it looks in the garden, and it's been reliable in my garden for many, many years, very cold tolerant. I think it probably just suffers from the fact that it is a species plant. It's not an improved or a hybrid or anything like that, so it's kind of obscure, but you can still get the seeds from a number of sources, and I did originally get it from Gelito. Alright, thanks for watching today. I hope you enjoyed this roundup of 10 perennials I'll be growing this year that are not generally available in mainstream garden centers. And if you have any questions about these, how I grew them, what conditions they like, or any of the other plants that I might be adding to my collection, please go ahead and drop those into the comments below the video. I'll see what I can do to help.